Welcome to Beyond the Clef, going further with your music program, presented by Director's Choice. This is a podcast for music educators by music educators. Our hope is that we can offer tips, advice, and inspiration, helping you to reach beyond.
Hi, I'm David Biel, and I'm here with Austin Swack. And Austin is a middle school band director at Twin Creeks Middle School in Spring ISD. Glad to have you on, Swack.
Really excited to be invited out,
Sure.
and thank you to you and Director's Choice for having me out today.
Sure. And what we wanted to do was today we're going to have a conversation about sight reading, something that we all do, something that we all go through. And I have my joys with it, but also I have my curses with it too. And so I think what we're going to do is just kind of talk in general about what we do and what you do in your program for sight reading for the whole process, right? Now, of course, there's the idea of when you start off with musicians, there's, what you do, and you could certainly talk about a component, or if you want, we can go ahead and segment it into just the year of those kids. But go ahead and tell us what that looks like and what your prep is like.
Well, in our program, sight reading really starts from the 6th grade, from the very, very beginning, in that we're always wanting to put new material in front of the kids, whether it's a 3-measure rhythm excerpt that they're supposed to count versus a whole line, which is where we try to get at the end of the year. We always want them to engage with something new every day, where they're having to read something, rhythm, note, anything. And then as they progress in both our first, second, and third bands, we have them read out of a beginning band book that is not the one that they started on. So
you're just playing music all the time.
Yes.
The idea is going and playing and learning new music and just putting stuff in front of them all the time.
Well, that's what the kids signed up for.
Sure, right. Yeah.
They absolutely signed up because they wanted to engage with music and play music, and they may not have signed up because they heard the virtues about playing concert F for 25 minutes. So we want to get experiences in front of them where they can just read new music, and once we've read it, rinse, repeat. And so that when we get to the UIL sight reading process, it's really just an extension of what we've already done, and it's not something we're panicking to put in place.
Right.
And by the time we get to it, we really just talk about UIL sight reading is just a game.
Right, and I think I figured that out a couple years ago. I was always worried about the process in the game, but I think the best groups I've ever had and the best experience I've ever had with sight reading was when I went in and we just did what we just normally do. It's just normal music, and I think if you get your kids prepped into that mode, it's just going to be really good for business.
It's the idea that sight reading isn't something special. Sight reading is just something we do on a regular basis. I have kids that will occasionally come in and want to get gigs to play for money, and they ask what do they need to do to be able to get to that level, and it's like, well, you absolutely have to sight read. I play church gigs on Sundays where all the music is given to me that morning, 1 hour for the service starts, and oftentimes the first time I'm playing it is in front at the service in front of everybody, and so I don't get a chance to ever read it. So that sight reading is actually one of the more applicable skills to a working musician.
Sure.
Because a lot of the gigs we get are impromptu, and we get the music put in front of us the day of or whatever, and we don't get to spend 3 months working out all the details. And so we really want the kids to feel like they're in a place where sight reading is a completely normal thing, and there's nothing
low stress,
unusual.
low key.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, now let's transition to what do you do in the room? Okay, and now I'll give some of my complaints. In the band world, like for instance, my group has 4 minutes of, it's the general, I think it's first, and then 3 minutes of the summary. And that drives me insane because I know orchestra doesn't do that. Is that correct?
Correct.
And then choir has a kind of a different deal because they play and then they go back again.
I believe they do it multiple times.
Right. And of course, if there's anybody, if the king of the world of sight reading is watching, what I would love is the perfect world would be they pass out the music, the judges say, all right, we'll be back in 7 minutes, we're going to get some coffee, and I do whatever I want because that's a normal experience. There's very few times in my band when, the principal's not going to run into me and say, hey, we have a pep rally, it starts in 7 minutes, here's the piece of music, by the way, for the first 4 minutes, you can't talk about this, and then in the next 3...
Careful what you wish for.
yeah, that's a good point. It could be tomorrow. So that's frustrating for me, but there is a process. Right. Okay, so tell me, what do you get the kids to do physically in the room? How does that look for them? What are they doing, and what are the tricks that you kind of go through?
That's the game we refer to. The whole 4-minute, 3-minute business, that's the game. And that's all we set it up as. There's a game, there's certain rules that you have to abide by in order to win said game. And at the end of the day, it's just another performance like the one you just got finished with on stage. And my ultimate goal is I would love for our kids to be able to sight read the contest without the summary explanation period.
Right.
And so when I start, we'll often start sight reading earlier in the year, a grade level below where I eventually read. So as a triple C, I read the level 3. And so we'll read level 2 without a summary explanation. We'll just do 1 go, maybe 2.
And remind us which is the summary again?
Where I'm not counting rhythms.
Right. It's just the general idea stuff.
Where you're given the counts and just showing the landmarks of the music.
Sure.
And then we'll read it once we get finished with that.
Right.
And while I think counting rhythms and being able to sing the pitch is a nice addition, I would like to be able to do it without that. So when we get in the room, we feel really comfortable with that process. And when they see some of those tricky rhythms that might come up, get counted to them, then they can feel just a little bit more comfortable. But we shouldn't need it.
So your whole goal when you're going through this process is to do it without the need and doing it without that. And then they're not... Then when you have that, it's just extra.
Exactly.
It's icing on the cake. And when that's exactly, I think we were talking about this the other day, when I play with my group, when I get closer to contest, I'll end up doing, I read grade 2, so I'll end up doing grade 3s. And now sometimes you got to be careful with that. I've had sometimes that actually ends up freaking them out a little bit, and you have to, and then that messes with their head. But if you have a really solid group, just give them music. And it doesn't have to be sight reading music, just pull out stuff.
That's right. The only thing that I think the sight reading music is especially useful for is the fact that all the pieces that are written for the process have like certain criterion that they have to follow. There's the range they have to follow, the rhythmic values, the key signatures you have to follow, and there's a couple of things. Almost every single one you can count on there being a moment where the low brass have the melody by themselves. Sure. And it's almost formulaic how some of these pieces are written. I hope none of the composers are watching. If you are, sorry. But it seems like there's almost a checklist that you go through as you write some of these pieces. There's almost always in the level 3 place where the woodwinds play, and then the brass come in right after them with very, very similar material. And so there's all these, not necessarily traps, but just features of the music that it's like we have to be aware of this coming in. That, say low reeds, when you're playing up the full band, you might play it a little differently than when we play woodwinds by ourselves, because you are the bass, you're everything, so you play out here regardless of the dynamic, and just certain things like that.
And I end up with my group, I try to get them to have a process in the room with their, like I have everybody on stand partners, and so they're sharing music, except for some of the instruments you can't do that, and then we have a way that they non-verbally communicate, and so we set that up really big where they're always doing this, and I'll give them time. It's hard to do, especially if you're a younger teacher. It's hard to give up 30 seconds and let them figure it out on their own. But I tell them, silently, non-verbally communicate to each other, touching on the stand any of the tricks or the things that you think you might mess up or that somebody else messes up. So then there's that little bit of a collaboration going on in the room so that you don't have those traps that we all have issues with. Like you said, you're doing church gigs. You're never perfect, right? And
I speak for yourself.
Okay, fair enough. Most of the time, you're going to mess up every now and then, and that's okay. And that's what I really try to train my kids to, is that you're not going to get a bad rating or bad comments because you mess up. Mess ups are not the thing. Recovering and trying to get over that and get the confidence and good sounds and all that. And of course, that goes with any of the music groups too, not just band. So.
And the great part about that is that's a lesson you can apply to any music, even your stage program. That same idea. One thing that on that topic that we like to do is, my big thing is the difference between concert A natural and concert A flat for the band music. Because at the level 2 and 3, most things are going to be either in concert B flat, concert E flat, where the A's the different one. You can use F, but it's seldomly done.
Sometimes I feel like my kids play the opposite of whatever they're supposed to. It's just,
so we do lots of that. Put your finger on the first A flat in this section, and then show your neighbor the fingering for that. Now find another one. Something we found that some of our kids have problems with is, if I'm a clarinet player, I see a third line B flat, concert A flat, and then later in the piece I happen in the low octave, I might accidentally play a natural in a different octave.
Right.
So go find one in a different octave, put your finger on that. And you're right. It's important to give the kids a little bit of time to mentally process that. Because I know in rehearsal, they couldn't possibly stand me talking to them for 7 minutes.
Right.
I have a hard time doing that to them and feeling nice about it. Sure. So giving them a little bit of break from just the barrage of information and let them have a little bit of think time process, find it with the finger along has always been really helpful.
Now, do you go ahead and I know you said you kind of give them music and you're always trying to do that, but as far as the actual sight reading, like years past, like we always buy that in the district. Right. Do you do that like on a certain day, or you just kind of do it when you have time, or how does that process work?
I make Fridays our dedicated sight reading day. So usually how Fridays will work out is in the fall we'll pass out books, beginning band books. I'll spend Monday through Thursday working up either a fall concert or Veterans Day concert, winter concert, whatever performance obligation that we have in the beginning of the year. We'll bookmark Monday through Thursday, work on that. And Friday is the day we pull out the beginning band books. I know at Twin Creeks we do sound innovations, so we give them essential elements to do. So they haven't seen any of the songs.
Right, sure.
And we just read the entire day.
And we have the essential elements for the first book, and then sometimes we'll pull out book 2 or book 3, or pull out their Beatles book, which is a great book, or their just anything
that's new that they've not seen before. Is really, really helpful. And then in the springtime, that's when we'll start pulling out either the UIL designated sight reading pieces from years past. We try to read a grade level below us to start our actual grade level, and then we'll do one that's above our grade level. Right. And for us, it just happens to work out that the 4 is usually significantly harder than the 3. So it kind of gives everyone a reality check, and then we get back to doing the 3s, and everybody feels much more comfortable and happy about that. It's like, wasn't that better than last week? And everybody leaves with a smile on their face that day. Right, sure. The Friday we read the grade 4 is a little bit of a grim day leaving the band hall. But then we use that to set up a positive experience the week after doing the grade 3s. And when my first year at Twin Creeks, we were still a double C. We read, I will never forget this, Willie Owen's Block Party. And
I read that one too.
It's Beatles.
Fantastic.
It's totally the Beatles. And one of my tuba players walks up to me. We're leaving the sight reading room, going back to the buses. He walks up to me, puts his hand on my shoulder, goes, "Mr. Swack, can we play more music like that?" and that was for me how I knew that I did the process at least a little bit right. Sure. Because they were engaging with the content of the music, and it helps that Willie does a wonderful job. He does. His sight reading tunes are great. I'm not saying the other ones aren't, but his stand out as being especially well crafted.
Oh yeah,
and so our kids.
So again, King of Sight Reading, we love Willie.
Yes.
Well, Mr. Owens, you're fantastic.
We love him for most everything he does.
That's true.
Not just limited to the sight reading realm. So every year whenever the information gets out on who wrote it, I'm always like, Willie, please.
Yeah, exactly.
That's always when we know that'll be a nice musical experience for our kids, and we want our kids to be able to musically engage with a sight reading tune, even if they read it once. Like if they leave the room humming the tune, then we've done something right. Yeah, and they're not freaking out, like white knuckling the whole time. Oh, I really hope no one gets mad at me and I don't miss a note and I don't squeak, and that's not a very fun place for anyone to be.
Right. And you've used in the past, or you still use some music software like a Sight Reading Factory or whatnot. And so, how does that help? And do you do that in your beginning group, and and how does that work for you?
We really started diving head first into it this year. We had dabbled with it in the past and done it. I'm lucky enough that I have a TV screen in our second band hall. It's repurposed. It used to be where they taught technology and careers, and they converted it to a second band hall. And we've had sectionals where students have come in, and whoever leading the section, either me or my assistant, will put up Sight Reading Factory on the screen, and we group sight read things together. I know in my top ensemble, we do Key of the Week assignments, and they sight read in whatever key that is. Because I feel like if they can't sight read at least somewhat competently in the key, do they really know it, or did they just drill the notes of the scale until the finger pattern made sense and all that.
Sure.
So we want them to be able to be fluent in whatever key of the week that we're doing. And so part of that is we'll sight read with it, and then as we continue through the year, we'll up the level of difficulty with the sight reading. And we're just now getting into the thick of it, where I think we're gonna bring kids in and kind of show them some multi-part compositions. The practice or sight reading factory really has a great feature that it can compose sight reading pieces, multi-part things, and it's
instantly. And you want a new one, you click new one.
Right.
Yeah.
And it has some of those qualities.
And it has, I think, vocal and orchestral pieces too. So if you're using it and you're not just a band person,
you can do you can tag it with solfege, and it's a really powerful tool that we found a lot of use in.
Right.
So we like I was saying, really try to get as many opportunities to get new things in front of the kids. They're sight reading all the time, so it's not something special. It's something we do.
Right. And I think that's the overall message. And everybody they've ever talked to, when they talk about sight reading, I think that's the gist. And I hope that people watching this program can get one thing, at least one thing that you do well, and take it on and just teach kids music. Because sight reading, in the end, could be, like I said, it could be a curse or a curse word, but in the end, it's just really good music. And if kids can sight read, they can play music pretty well.
Well, that's something Keith Dye at Texas Tech taught me, is if you can't get through your contest program and at least sound some semblance of the song that it's trying to be, when you first read it, it might be too hard.
Right.
So I've really taken that advice to heart, and anytime we want to program something, we put it in front of them, and even if we're going at an exaggeratedly slow tempo, if it sounds sort of at what the piece is trying to be, then we might have a shot at playing it. But if it's just all over the place, then that might be something that we might just put back in the cabinet and save it for another year.
We've had such a great discussion conversation so far. I hope that our audience is getting as much out of it as I am. This is a lot of fun. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk more specifics about what you do in the room.
We like to prepare directors for every step of the process. We want to start from the beginning of planning the trip, and then we'll talk you through what your students need for TSA before you get on the plane, about baggage fees, and then we'll send a professional tour director on the trip with you to walk you through. If you have any issues with getting anyone on the plane or any bags checked, you'll have a professional there.
All right, so we're back. So now, Austin, tell me about the room and the process and what you're actually doing. For instance, right before I go in, I've just gotten off a stage, and I tell the kids, like, I feel like sometimes they want to relax, but I say it's not over. So I call it focus mode. The kids have to start to think about the next thing, and I try to get them really calm, but in a good, positive place. And when they go in, they stand at their chairs so they have a good impression on the judges, because the judges don't want to see a bunch of people slobbing in there. So walk me through how that kind of works with you, and then what you do when you're getting into the room.
Well, first thing is, when we talk about the event, we talk about like it's two separate concerts. And so when we're coming off stage, we're reminding them, hey, you still have your second concert left to go. I think it's really important that I prep my assistant beforehand with a bottle of water.
Yes.
So I can get that, because I'm normally just pouring sweat from the hot stage. It's not a great sight, so I want to kind of help get the sheen off and maybe get a little bit of water in my system before I walk in the room. So we have them all go in right in the same order that they left the stage in. There are sometimes some seating alterations that we'll make to this whole setup. I use risers on stage, and of course in sight reading room you wouldn't use risers. I let my euphoniums sit with the low reeds in our contest music, because those parts in our grade level kind of work the same. In sight reading, I have our euphoniums go back to the low brass. I have our horns and altos sit right with each other. Normally I have my horns right on their kind of own row in the center of the band. And so I make some strategic alterations to our setup chart, so that we can be in a little bit more of a position where same people playing same parts are sitting kind of near each other.
Okay.
And our percussion setup is substantially less involved for sight reading.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So we give everybody time to get in, make sure everybody has chairs, no one has a sinking stand. We ask them to put their binders underneath their chairs, and we can all sit down.
And I think it's really important that you specifically in the band hall before, or the choir hall or whatever, you tell them all that process. I think sometimes I've seen bands that the kids don't know, and then they're freaked out. And so I always walk the kids through every step of the way, what they're going to do. And what I'll actually do is I say, okay, we're in the band hall, in my band hall right now. Let's stand, and we're going to exit like we were on stage. Let's go down the hall, then we take a U-turn and come right on back, and then they pretend like it's... And in the meantime, I'll have my assistant move the stands around and do that. And so they have to sit down and have a new setup.
And that's pretty common, because it's very infrequently the band that went before you is of a similar size. And the contest hosts, the high school students usually that are moving chairs, are really rushed. The band just left, and they're trying to keep on schedule. Sure. And so chairs are flying around. And it's easy for a setup chart not to be exactly the way it is in our band hall. Yeah. So we always prepare, especially if you're an in person, to not have a chair. Right. And you need to be vocal about it. Your hand needs to go immediately up and get someone's attention that you need something, whatever you need to be successful. So we're really insistent about that part. And we wanted the impression the whole time that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, that we've thought the details out, and we want to execute those details whenever we come into the room.
And then what about now? We have that 3-minute score study period. So tell me about what you're doing there.
So my instruction to the kids is they're to be sitting in the same way for every section. We don't let them kind of sit however they want, because regardless of what's happening, people are getting an impression of the ensemble. Right. So everybody's sitting back in their chair. We've decided ahead that every section's holding their instrument in the same way. And it's sort of like it really doesn't matter what it is as long as it's the same and it looks like that's a detail that's been worked out. And that's usually the time that the head judge addresses the band, at least in our region. We'll address the band. We'll ask them, how did you do? Felt like you do. And we always tell them, be polite. Even if you personally didn't feel like you had a very strong performance and on stage, you never want to go, man, that was awful, to the head judge in sight reading.
Yeah, that happened to me last year, actually. We had a freak out on stage, and of course, my thought is, I'm going to go backstage and, get sick. Right. But, you have to, here we go, next thing. Yep. So when we were walking through, I found those kids immediately, and I said, hey, it's okay. It was a great performance. Now we have a new job to do. And so no matter what happened on stage, you have a new performance. And I like what you said there, because I've never really thought of it that way. I always think of it's a different game, but it's two performances back to back. And they don't often do that.
Right. Well, I can't think of any other situation that we would do that where we perform over an extended period of time, except for a high school football game, and you and I do in the middle school. They don't do that. Yeah. So it's one of the very few opportunities where they do perform two completely separate programs, just right back to back to each other. So preparing for them for that is really important, and kind of trying to get all the variables out. So whenever I'm occupied with the score study session, I really don't want them starting any fires that I'm not right there to immediately go, stop doing that. That's not how you want to talk to someone.
Sure. And if you have an assistant, a lot of times, that's my assistant. What I tell them is, your job is to go do that and handle all that while I'm going and doing this other thing, because I want to focus on that score study. And every now and then I'm doing that, and I hear this thing going on, and I'm like, you got to do that, because I have this 3 minutes, and I don't want to mess that up. Right.
Yeah, my assistant will get on the podium and please make sure that you angle your chairs and stands correctly, and everything's the right height. All the percussionists have all the sticks and mallets. The timpani are tuned correct. We have a wonderful percussion coordinator in our district, J.D. Guzman, who will accompany us to contest. Will make sure all those things are set up for the kids correctly. If he, for some reason, wasn't able to be around, that'd be something I'd ask one of my assistants to do. Just making sure all that's set up while I'm sitting down and looking at the music.
And by the way, what is your assistant's name? You got to give a shout out.
Carly Hood. She's absolutely wonderful. We've been at Twin Creeks together our entire time there.
That's really nice.
And so it's been nice to have that level of consistency and that level of trust. that I can on contest day, I can say I need to make sure that these things are absolutely correct.
Right.
And I remember we were talking to pre-UIL with some people in our district talking about scheduling. It's like, well, we could have the bands go back to back. I said, well, guys, I rely on my assistant. She's absolutely mission critical that I have her around because I need her. And in order to get some details really ironed out the correct way.
Right.
So having someone there in the room.
And if you don't have an assistant, a high school person, or just
someone,
a volunteer that's a good musician that knows what's going on, because some of the people aren't as blessed as we are to have multiple people. So now going back into discussion, we've done the score study. How do you start off? What's the process before the first go? Before the timer starts, what do you do from score study to there?
In the score study, I'm looking for those locations that might cause us some concern, and that what's going to cause the kids' confidence issues. That's really what I'm looking at. Scoring wise, where are a bunch of instruments going to drop out and leave one section exposed that they might think they made an error? What rhythms might we commonly misplay that will cause those confidence issues? And I really want to earmark all those. You can bring the sticky note pad. You can bring the sticky tabs. You can write on the sticky tabs. You can't write on score, but you can do all those tools to kind of earmark those locations that are important.
Sure.
So then when we come in, what I do, and I'm really insistent about this, is in our region we have multiple classifications of band play. We have 2Cs, 3Cs, varsities, non-varsity play on the same day. So you have sight reading folders, which all the pieces for that day live in that folder, and the kids are asked to open the folder, pull out the piece themselves. I've seen that as a valuable opportunity to gain information about the piece. So when we sight read at home, we have similar sight reading folders. I've taken the time to take all the UIL tunes and put them in folders for the kids, so I'm not passing out just individual tunes, I'm passing out the folders. It's a huge project up front. It's totally front-loaded, totally worth it.
Yeah, right. You're done.
So we pass out those folders, they take the piece out, and then I expect the kids to be accountable for key signatures in the piece, tempo markings in the piece, time and key signatures, rather. Accidentals. Is it a piece that stays in one key, or is it a piece that moves around with accidentals? I know last year the level 3 had a nice little moment when it went from B natural to A flat, because it's playing around, dabbling in minor key a little bit. So with that, they're looking for things like that. They're looking for any fermata, caesura, anything like that, roadmap wise.
Right.
And when they turn the piece around, before I even step on the podium, I ask that they know those details of the piece.
So you're way braver than I am, because I did that one year, and they were doing that, and then, of course, it's usually a trombone player. I don't know why it's always trombone players. But, they turned it back around, and now we're actually in the heat of things, and they had the wrong part, because they were worried about that other stuff. I think you're braver than I am on that. Maybe I'll try to go back to that at some point.
The first thing they always check has to be the what they're asked to check is the part.
They get really excited.
Yeah, we've had bass clef euphonium players get treble clef parts in the past.
Right.
And
it's all about training.
Yes.
It's all about training, which is the whole theme of sight reading.
Right.
Train them ahead of time.
It's a game. That's what we say. It's a game.
Yeah.
You have to play by the rules of the game, and some of the conditions the game sets up for you.
Right.
So if you have to pull the piece out of your folder, why pull the piece out of your folder and immediately turn around when you're going to pull it, look at it for 10 seconds?
Right.
Now, we're not making any overt, fingering. Right. That's past the intent of that.
Sure.
But if there's some information that can be gleaned, and kids can be preparing to play in their heads in the key of E flat before I stepped on the podium, then we're already a little ahead of the game.
Sure. And I think a lot of people do that. Now, I hope, again, I don't know why I keep on referring to the king of UIL sight reading, but I hope that at some point somebody doesn't make a rule to prevent that. But I don't think they will, but you know how it is.
Or make it a part of the process.
Sure. Yeah.
Where there is that free,
that would
just
be
like
great.
I get 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You get 30 seconds.
Right. Yeah. And make that applicable for everybody. Right. So now you've done that.
Yes.
Are you ready to begin at this point?
We'll do 1 or 2 deep breaths
Yes,
in and out.
yes, always. Got to get
To
everybody
calm the mood.
Yeah, because this is really the first time when I'm doing it. This is the first time that I have them sit in front of me, all looking at me. There's no distractions. Everybody's quiet. Everybody's in.
Since the stage performance.
Right.
And so depending on how that stage performance ended really impacts what their mood's going to be in the sight reading room. It's really important to figure out how to check that at the door.
Sure. And I also think that at this point, I really encourage and I thank the parents for being in the room. I really want parents to be in.
Yeah.
I think my principals, I want to see that because every time I have a new principal and they're seeing something like that, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe what you're doing. The parents always, oh, I can't believe that. It's an event to see. It really is. Having them learn music right then for the first time.
And the great thing about that sight reading process is no other subject really asks their students to do something like that, where they have to engage with the content and be assessed on it instantaneously and not really prepared for the specifics of what's going to be going on.
Right.
And I think every administrator I've ever had come into one of these contests has always been really impressed with how all this comes together in the span of 7 minutes. So anyways, we have them all in, we do score study and all that. All right, so it's time on the podium. We're about to flip over the music. So we flip over the music. Anytime we're in a key, I have them finger through a 1-octave major scale, quarter-eighth notes, just so they can kind of get the lay of the land in their heads and their fingers before we start. Whenever I do the general explanation, I do not count the beats. I know a lot of people snap and count the beats. And I just have found that's a very inefficient way to convey information. So I'm just going 1, 2, 3, 4, trumpets, 2, 3. I only get four opportunities in each measure to communicate anything, and usually I'm just communicating a number.
Right.
So what I instead prefer to do is take my baton and tap the baton on the stand, let that be the metronome, and then I just speak over it.
Okay.
We're talking about articulation patterns, slur to tongue to. This is who has the melody. Even in sight reading, we have to always be accountable for who has the melody and not overplay that, and then empower those students who do have the melody to, like, hey, play out. We always say in sight reading room, if you have the melody, P means powerful. And it's only if you have the accompaniment that you need to tone that back down.
Right.
Because melody always has to be forefront. And sometimes I think that's where some of us will get in trouble, is when we try to overplay the dynamic, and instead of sounding quiet, it sounds hesitant.
Right.
And
it's all about confidence. That's again, that's what you want to do.
And I've had plenty of judges tell me, we'd rather hear a band overplay the dynamic with a great sound and confidently write notes than to underplay it with poor sound and lots of concern in the students' heads. So I'll be going over those big details of the music. When we get to a box number, that's when I'll say, all right, and measure 9. Here we are. Right. This is who has melody. This is the style of the piece. There's apparently a large number of sight reading pieces written in a waltz style. Unmarked. Some are marked, some are not. So reminding them, hey, this is waltz style. Beats 2 and 3 have to be lifted.
Right. And I also train my guys that if sometimes I might be just wrapped up in the moment, and I say measure 9, but that was like 2 measures ago, and they just know just to move on, and it's okay not to freak out if I happen to move it around, or sometimes I might jump, and that's okay too. Okay. Well then now step on over, and you did say that the general, and again. Choir and orchestra don't do this the same.
Yes.
So lucky. But you say the general is that way, and then you really don't focus in your prep on the summary, but
not too much, not until the end.
Right.
Where we're focusing on this is what you're actually going to see on the day of.
Right.
Conceptually, we want to keep it away from that.
Sure.
So we're going through those big things. That's where we talk about breathing plan is in the general. We talk about how long each phrase is going to be. Is it going to be a 2-bar phrase, 4-bar phrase, and organizing the ends of long notes. Right. Those are all concepts we talk about in the general.
Sure.
Then we get to the summary, and that's when that work I did in the study about where are those places where we might lose confidence, that's when we target those.
Okay, yeah.
And really, all right, and then that point we just jump all over the music.
Sure.
Because sometimes especially if you're going a little slow and you want to do something more than once, that 3 minutes might not be enough to get through the entire piece again and have enough time to kind of wrap it up all nice and tidy. So I'll hit the big spots that I feel that they might appreciate a little help, or that will help them be really confident. Anything I feel that they might feel less than 100% about is what I'll go over. That's when I'll go over percussion things. What I see sometimes with especially young directors is we forget anything under the tuba line is existent.
Right.
And so we'll miss a triangle solo. It's just a one very inconspicuous part on the page, just a one-note triangle solo. But then when you hear the piece, it's like right in the middle of a rest for everyone else, and it's a super important effect, and the kid's just sitting there.
Yeah.
Was that me?
Yeah. Right.
And I want to avoid those parts, and so that's when I kind of try to get those parts all lined up. I know some directors do this. I don't leave time for questions. I don't believe in questions inside the room. On contest day at all.
Sometimes I feel like you can get some great questions, but then sometimes I'm always afraid of, when are we going to eat lunch?
Yeah.
It's one of those. Especially in middle school. It's just, they're kids, and they do weird things sometimes.
One of my former head directors would speak about an experience that he had when he was an assistant. And the person will remain nameless. Would love talking about appoggiaturas. This is middle school sight reading, by the way. Loved an appoggiatura here, an appoggiatura there, and really stress this and bring this appoggiatura out. Right. The Dog and Pony Show.
Right.
And are there any questions? Barry sax player. What's an appoggiatura? and it's like the wind out of sails, like you wouldn't believe. It was great. So from that cautionary tale, we're not going to do questions. If you have a question, it should have been asked at home. Before we left, if I did my job right of preparing you to be successful here, we should be clear on what we're doing.
Sure.
On that.
Well, that's a great conversation about that. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Clef. Reach beyond and go further at beyondtheclef.com. Brought to you by your travel and performance partners at Director's Choice.